Lyria's eyes fluttered open to the harsh, crimson light of Zarlan V's setting sun. The air was thin, making each breath a laborious task. Her head throbbed from dehydration, and the acrid smell of sulfur filled her nostrils. As she tried to move, the weight of the chains around her wrists and ankles brought her back to reality. Her comrades had abandoned her, leaving her bound and defenseless. The memory of the last battle haunted her thoughts. The Elorian fleet had been overwhelmed by the unexpected ferocity of the human counterattack. Amidst the chaos, Lyria had been captured, her own people deeming her expendable. She cursed under her breath, the taste of betrayal bitter on her tongue. Her surroundings offered little hope. The rocky landscape was barren, dotted with jagged outcrops and the occasional twisted alien plant. The temperature dropped rapidly as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Lyria shivered against the encroaching cold. She had to find a way out, but her energy was waning fast. Desperation fueled her attempts to break free from the chains. She strained against the metal, her muscles burning with effort, but it was no use. Her vision blurred with exhaustion, and she slumped back against the rock, fighting to stay conscious. In the distance, she heard the faint hum of engines, a sound that both terrified and intrigued her. Was it a human ship, or something else entirely? Captain Marcus Hale peered through the cockpit window of his scout ship, the sleek form of the Intrepid glinting in Zarlan V's twilight. The distress signal he had intercepted was faint, almost lost amidst the planet's electromagnetic interference. Yet, something about it had piqued his curiosity. He landed the scout ship with practiced precision, dust kicking up in swirling clouds around him. Clad in a rugged spacesuit, Marcus stepped onto the rocky surface, scanning the area with a handheld sensor. The device beeped rhythmically, leading him towards the source of the signal. As he rounded a large boulder, he saw her, an alien girl, slumped and chained, her delicate features marked by weariness and pain. Her skin, a soft luminescent blue, stood out starkly against the bleak landscape. Marcus approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "Are you all right?" he called out. His voice filtered through the suit's communicator. The girl's eyes fluttered open, filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Stay back!" she croaked, her voice raw from thirst. Marcus knelt a few feet away, showing his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. "My name is Marcus Hale. I'm with the UHC." He reached into his pack and pulled out a water canister, placing it within her reach. "Here, drink." Lyria eyed him suspiciously, but her desperation won over. She reached out with trembling hands and drank deeply. The water revitalized her, if only slightly. She looked at Marcus, her gaze softening a fraction. "Lyria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Lyria." Marcus nodded, glancing at the chains that bound her. "Who did this to you?" "My own people," Lyria replied bitterly. "They left me to die." Marcus's brow furrowed. "We need to get you out of here," he said, pulling a small cutting tool from his belt. He worked quickly, the metal sparking as the tool sliced through the chains. "Can you walk?" Lyria tested her legs, wincing as she stood. "I think so," she said, leaning on Marcus for support. Together, they made their way back to his scout ship. The journey was slow, each step a struggle for Lyria. Marcus's steady presence was a reassuring anchor in her chaotic world. As they boarded the ship, Marcus helped her into a seat and secured her in. "Hang in there," he said. "We're getting you to safety." Lyria's eyes closed, exhaustion finally taking over. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to hope. Lyria awoke in the medical bay of the Intrepid, her body aching but her mind alert. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the desolate landscape of Zarlan V. She glanced around, disoriented, until she saw Marcus standing nearby, talking with a tall woman in a white coat. "How is she, Dr. Kovac?" Marcus asked, concern evident in his voice. Dr. Elena Kovac, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from her tablet. "Dehydrated, malnourished, and with several minor injuries, but she'll recover with proper care," she replied. Turning her attention to Lyria, she offered a reassuring smile. "You're safe now. We'll take good care of you." Lyria tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "Thank you," she managed, her voice still weak. "But I can't stay here. The crawl—" "Easy," Marcus interrupted gently, placing a hand on her shoulder to keep her from straining herself. We'll talk about the crawl later. Right now, you need to rest. Despite her exhaustion, Lyria's mind raced with thoughts of the impending threat. She had to convince these humans to trust her, to believe in the danger that loomed over them all. But for now, she had no choice but to comply. Over the next few days, Lyria's health improved, thanks to Dr. Kovach's diligent care. During this time, she began to interact more with the crew. Initially, there was palpable tension. Many were wary of her presence, their suspicion evident in their guarded expressions and whispered conversations. One evening, while resting in the ship's common area, Lyria found herself seated opposite Marcus. He handed her a cup of warm tea, a gesture she was starting to appreciate. I know this isn't easy, Marcus began, breaking the silence. Trust isn't something that comes naturally, especially not after everything that's happened. Lyria nodded, wrapping her hands around the cup. My people and yours have a complicated history, she admitted, but the Crawl are a threat to us all. They manipulated the Ilorians, forced us into this conflict. We never wanted this war. Marcus listened intently, his eyes reflecting both empathy and caution. I believe you, he said after a moment, but convincing the rest of the crew will take time. As days turned into weeks, Lyria gradually earned the crew's respect. She shared her knowledge of the Crawl, their tactics, and their weaknesses. Her insights proved invaluable during a tense encounter with a Crawl scout ship. Under her guidance, the Intrepid managed to evade detection and gather crucial intel on Crawl movements. Despite these successes, the atmosphere on board remained strained. The incident with the saboteur only heightened the crew's anxiety. Late one night, Lyria awoke to find her quarters ransacked, her personal belongings scattered. It was a clear message. She was still not fully accepted. Determined to prove herself, Lyria approached Marcus and Dr. Kovach with a bold plan. We need to strike at the heart of the Crawl's operations, she said, her eyes blazing with conviction. There's a hidden base where they're developing new weapons. If we can gather intel and disrupt their plans, it could turn the tide in our favor. Marcus leaned forward, considering her words. It's a risk, he acknowledged, but it might be our best shot. We'll need to prepare the crew and secure their trust. Marcus guided Lyria through the labyrinthine corridors of the Intrepid, their footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. Crew members paused to stare, their faces a blend of suspicion and intrigue. Lyria kept her head high, aware of the scrutiny, but determined not to show any weakness. In the command center, Marcus introduced Lyria to the senior officers. Commander Jennings, the first officer, eyed Lyria with open skepticism. Captain, are you sure about this? He asked, his tone laced with doubt. Bringing an alien on board, especially one from the enemy's ranks? She's not our enemy, Marcus replied firmly. Lyria has information that could be crucial in our fight against the Crawl. We need to give her a chance. Dr. Kovach stepped forward, her demeanor professional yet warm. I'll conduct a thorough medical examination and debrief her, she said. We'll also need to ensure she has the necessary accommodations. Over the next few days, Lyria underwent a series of medical tests and debriefings. Dr. Kovach marveled at her physiology, noting the differences and similarities between Elorians and humans. Your ability to navigate through space using bioelectromagnetic fields is fascinating, she remarked during one session. It explains a lot about how your ships can maneuver so precisely. Lyria nodded, grateful for the doctor's genuine interest. It's a skill honed over generations, she explained. But it's also why the Crawl sought to control us. They needed our navigators for their conquests. As Lyria settled into her new quarters, she began to familiarize herself with the Intrepid's layout and systems. The crew's initial wariness persisted, but small gestures of acceptance emerged. A nod here, a brief conversation there. It was progress, albeit slow. One afternoon, while working in the ship's library, Lyria encountered Lieutenant Samara Blake, the chief engineer. Samara was engrossed in a technical manual, her brow furrowed in concentration. Noticing Lyria, she glanced up and offered a hesitant smile. Need any help? Lyria hesitated before replying. Actually, yes. I was hoping to learn more about your ship's propulsion systems. Samara's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Well, you've come to the right person. Let me show you. As they delved into the intricacies of the Intrepid's engineering, a tentative friendship began to form. Samara's openness and willingness to share her knowledge helped Lyria feel more at ease. They spent hours discussing engineering principles, exchanging ideas and insights. Despite these positive interactions, the shadow of distrust still loomed large. During a routine inspection, a group of crew members cornered Lyria, their expressions hostile. "We haven't forgotten what your people did," one of them spat. "Why should we trust you?" Lyria met their gaze evenly. "I understand your anger," she said calmly, "but if we don't work together, the crawl will destroy us all. I'm here to help, not harm." The tension eased slightly, but Lyria knew she had a long way to go before she could truly be accepted. She focused on her duties, assisting with navigation and sharing her strategic knowledge. Each small victory, each piece of valuable intel, gradually chipped away at the crew's resistance. One night, as the ship cruised through the vast expanse of space, Marcus found Lyria on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, joining her. "It is," Lyria agreed. "In my culture, we believe the stars are the souls of our ancestors, guiding us." Marcus smiled. "Maybe they're guiding us now toward something better." Lyria turned to him, her expression sincere. "Thank you, Marcus, for giving me a chance." He nodded. "We're all in this together, Lyria. Let's make it count." The air on board the Intrepid grew tense as Lyria's presence continued to stir unease among the crew. While some had begun to accept her, others remained suspicious. This underlying friction came to a head one fateful night. Lyria was alone in the navigation room, analyzing the latest star charts, when the lights flickered ominously. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine, an instinctual warning. Moments later, the door hissed open, and a shadowy figure slipped inside. Before she could react, the intruder lunged, a knife glinting in the dim light. Lyria fought back with all her strength, but her attacker was relentless. They grappled, knocking over equipment and scattering data pads. Just as the assailant was about to deliver a fatal blow, the door burst open. Marcus, flanked by security officers, stormed in and subdued the attacker. Panting and shaken, Lyria looked up at Marcus. "How did you know?" "Security breach alarm," Marcus replied tersely, eyeing the would-be assassin. "We had a feeling something was wrong when we noticed anomalies in the system." The attacker, a disgruntled crew member named Daniels, glared defiantly as he was restrained. "You're making a mistake, Captain," he spat. "She's one of them. She'll betray us." Marcus shook his head, his expression hard. "The only betrayal here is yours, Daniels. Take him to the brig." As Daniels was led away, Marcus turned to Lyria, his concern evident. "Are you all right?" Lyria nodded, though her hands still trembled. "I will be. Thank you." The incident left a lasting impact on the crew. The reality of the sabotage attempt forced everyone to confront their biases and fears. Marcus addressed the crew the next day, emphasizing the importance of unity and trust. "Lyria is here to help us," he declared. "We either stand together or we fall apart." With Daniels in the brig, tensions began to ease slightly, though the atmosphere remained charged. Lyria knew it was time to reveal more about the crawl and the true nature of the conflict. She requested a meeting with the senior officers and key crew members. In the briefing room, the atmosphere was solemn. Lyria stood at the front, her gaze steady as she began to speak. "The crawl have been manipulating us for years," she started. "They saw humanity's rapid advancements as a threat to their dominion over this sector of the galaxy. They coerced my people, the Elorians, into fighting a war we never wanted." Dr. Kovacs leaned forward, her interest piqued. "How did they coerce you?" "They exploited our vulnerabilities," Lyria explained. "Our reliance on their technology, their promises of protection. They played on our fears and manipulated our leaders. Those who resisted were eliminated." Commander Jennings frowned. "Why haven't we heard about this before?" "The Crawl are masters of deception," Lyria replied. "They've kept their involvement hidden, ensuring that the conflict seemed like a natural war between humans and Elorians. It served their purpose to keep us divided." Marcus interjected. We intercepted a communication about a crawl base. What can you tell us about it? Lyria nodded. It's one of their primary research facilities. They're developing new weapons and technologies there. If we can gather intel and disrupt their operations, it could give us a significant advantage. The room buzzed with renewed energy. Plans began to form as the crew recognized the gravity of their situation. Lyria's revelations had shifted their perspective, highlighting the necessity of their alliance. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus approached Lyria. You did well, he said quietly. It's not easy to confront these truths. Lyria smiled faintly. It's the only way forward. We need to fight together. The crew mobilized quickly, preparing for the mission to the crawl base. Lyria provided detailed maps and tactical insights, drawing from her knowledge as a former navigator. Marcus and Dr. Kovac worked closely with her, refining their strategy. During the final briefing, Marcus addressed the crew with unwavering resolve. This mission is dangerous, but it's crucial. The Crawl have played us against each other for too long. It's time to take the fight to them and show them what humanity and our allies are capable of. Lyria felt a surge of determination as she looked around at the assembled faces. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for liberation, for unity. As the Intrepid set course for the Crawl base, the ship hummed with a collective sense of purpose. Captain Marcus Hale stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen displaying the swirling nebula. Prepare for silent running, he ordered. We don't want to alert the Crawl to our presence. Lyria, stationed at the navigation console, manipulated the ship's controls with precision. Her deep knowledge of both Elorian and Crawl technology was invaluable. There's a narrow corridor through the nebula, she said, pointing to a barely visible path on the screen. It's risky, but it will bring us close enough without detection. Marcus nodded. Take us in, Lyria, slow and steady. As the Intrepid maneuvered through the nebula, the crew remained on high alert. The ship's sensors were attuned to any sign of Crawl activity. The tension was palpable, everyone aware of the potential dangers lurking in the gas clouds. Suddenly, the sensors pinged, and the screen lit up with multiple contacts. Crawl scout ships emerged from the nebula, their dark hulls shimmering in the light of distant stars. They've spotted us, shouted Lieutenant Samara Blake from her station. Marcus's voice was calm but firm. All hands, battle stations. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Lyria's fingers flew over the controls, plotting a course that would weave through the nebula, using the dense gas to mask their movements. The Intrepid's engines roared to life, and the ship darted through the cloud, dodging enemy fire. The Crawl scouts pursued relentlessly, their energy weapons lighting up the nebula like fireworks. Return fire, Marcus commanded. The Intrepid's turrets responded with a barrage of laser blasts, striking several Crawl ships. Explosions rippled through the nebula, sending debris scattering in all directions. Despite the fierce combat, Lyria maintained her focus, guiding the Intrepid closer to the Crawl base. There it is, she exclaimed, as the massive structure came into view, partially obscured by the nebula's swirling dust. Marcus assessed the situation quickly. Launch the drones. We need a full scan of that base. As the Intrepid's drones deployed, they transmitted detailed images of the Crawl base back to the ship. It was heavily fortified with multiple defense turrets and fighter bays. We need to disable those defenses before we can proceed, Marcus said. Target their power generators. Under Lyria's guidance, the Intrepid's weapons focused on the base's weak points. The crew worked in unison, their movements a well-practiced dance of precision and efficiency. One by one, the Crawl's defense systems went offline, and the path to the base became clearer. Prepare for boarding, Marcus ordered, his voice filled with determination. We're going in. The Intrepid docked with the Crawl base, its boarding clamps securing a tight seal. Marcus led the assault team, a mix of seasoned Marines and technical experts, including Lyria. As the airlock hissed open, they moved swiftly and silently into the dimly lit corridors of the base. The interior was a labyrinth of metallic corridors and towering bulkheads designed to disorient intruders. Lyria's knowledge of Crawl architecture proved essential as she guided the team through the maze-like structure. The main control room is this way, she whispered, pointing down a narrow passage. The team advanced cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The eerie silence was punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional clank of metal. They encountered little resistance at first, but as they neared the control room, Crawl soldiers appeared, blocking their path. A fierce firefight erupted. Energy blasts and gunfire echoed through the halls, illuminating the darkness with flashes of light. Marcus and his team fought with relentless precision, their training and coordination giving them an edge over the Crawl defenders. Lyria, though less experienced in combat, used her knowledge to outmaneuver their enemies, disabling security systems and sealing off reinforcements. After a grueling battle, the team breached the control room. Inside, massive consoles and holographic displays filled the space, showing real-time data on Crawl operations. Lyria rushed to the main terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'm accessing their mainframe," she said, "downloading all their data." Marcus kept watch, his weapon trained on the door. "Make it quick, we don't have much time." As Lyria worked, alarms blared throughout the base. "They know we're here," she said urgently. "We need to move, now." With the data download complete, the team retreated, fighting their way back to the Intrepid. The corridors were now swarming with Crawl soldiers determined to stop them. Marcus covered the rear, ensuring his team could reach the ship. Back on board the Intrepid, the docking clamps disengaged, and the ship pulled away from the Crawl base. The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief as they watched the base recede into the distance. "Mission accomplished," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride and exhaustion. Lyria slumped into a chair, her energy spent. "We did it," she whispered, a sense of accomplishment washing over her. "We have the intel." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were amazing, Lyria. We couldn't have done it without you." As the Intrepid set course for the United Human Coalition headquarters, the crew began to analyze the data they had retrieved. It contained detailed plans of the Crawl's upcoming invasion, along with information on their key leaders and strategic weaknesses. The mission had been a success, but they all knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Dr. Kovac, Lyria, and the senior officers gathered around the main table. "We've confirmed the worst of our fears," Marcus began, his tone grave. "The Crawl are planning a full-scale invasion. Their fleet is mobilizing at several key points throughout the galaxy." Lyria pointed to a cluster of coordinates on the holographic map. "These are their primary staging areas. From here they can strike at multiple human and Elorian colonies simultaneously." Commander Jennings frowned. "If they succeed, we'll be overwhelmed. We need to strike first, disrupt their plans before they can launch." Marcus nodded. "Agreed. But we can't do this alone. We need to unite the UHC and the Elorians. This intel might be the leverage we need to bring everyone to the table." Lyria looked around the room, her gaze determined. "My people will listen. They have to. If we can present a united front, we stand a chance." The crew set to work, sending encrypted transmissions to UHC headquarters and the Elorian Council. The messages were clear. The Crawl threat was imminent, and cooperation was essential for survival. As they awaited responses, the Intrepid prepared for the next phase of their mission. The days that followed were tense. The crew's diligence paid off when they received confirmation of an emergency summit between human and Elorian leaders. The Intrepid was designated to transport key delegates to the neutral meeting point, a space station orbiting a remote planet. As they approached the station, Marcus briefed his team. "This summit is critical. We need to ensure the safety of all delegates and facilitate open communication. Our survival depends on it." The Intrepid docked with the massive space station, a structure bristling with defensive weaponry and filled with representatives from both the UHC and Elorian factions. Marcus and Lyria led the delegation, moving through the bustling corridors toward the central conference chamber. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation and unease. Human and Elorian leaders eyed each other warily across the large, circular table. Marcus took his place beside Admiral Graves, the UHC's highest-ranking officer. On the opposite side, Lyria stood next to High Counselor Valor of the Elorians. Admiral Graves spoke first, his voice firm. "We all know why we're here. The Crawl are preparing to launch an invasion that could wipe us all out. We need to put aside our differences and work together to stop them. High Counselor Valar nodded, his expression serious. The Elorian Council acknowledges the threat. We have seen the data provided by the Intrepid and agree that immediate action is necessary. Lyria stepped forward, addressing the assembly. We cannot let the Crawl divide us any longer. They have used deception and fear to keep us at odds. But now we have the opportunity to unite and fight back. Together, we can turn the tide. The discussion was intense, with both sides voicing concerns and strategies. Old grievances surfaced, but the urgency of the situation kept the focus on cooperation. Marcus and Lyria played pivotal roles, bridging the gap between their peoples and emphasizing the common goal. As the summit progressed, a plan began to take shape. Joint fleets would be formed, combining the strengths of human and Elorian technology and tactics. Key targets identified from the Crawl data would be prioritized, aiming to disrupt their supply lines and command structure. A holographic projection displayed the United Fleet formations, with strategic points marked for coordinated strikes. Admiral Graves pointed to the largest concentration of Crawl forces. This will be our primary target. If we can break their command here, we can destabilize their entire operation. High Counselor Valar added, Our navigators and pilots will guide the combined fleet through the most secure routes. With precise timing and execution, we can achieve a decisive victory. The delegates nodded in agreement, the atmosphere shifting from tension to determination. The final agreement was signed, marking the beginning of a historic alliance. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus and Lyria took a moment to reflect. This is just the beginning, Marcus said. The real challenge lies ahead, but we have a fighting chance now. Lyria smiled, a mix of hope and resolve in her eyes. We do, and together we will face whatever comes. Back on the Intrepid, the crew prepared for the upcoming battles. The ship buzzed with renewed purpose, every member aware of the critical role they would play in the days to come. The United Fleet began to assemble, a formidable force ready to confront the Crawl and defend their shared galaxy. The United Fleet, a formidable assembly of human and Elorian warships, gathered near Orion's belt. The stars glittered in the background, a silent witness to the impending conflict. The fleet's formation was meticulously planned, with each ship assigned a critical role in the battle strategy. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Captain Marcus Hale stood with Lyria, Admiral Graves, and High Counselor Valar, overseeing the final preparations. The atmosphere was tense, but charged with a sense of purpose. Every crew member knew the stakes. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their civilizations. Lyria monitored the fleet's positioning, her knowledge of Crawl tactics guiding their strategy. The Crawl will attempt to flank us, she advised, pointing to a holographic display. We need to anticipate their moves and counter them before they can execute their maneuvers. Admiral Graves nodded. We'll deploy our interceptors here, he said, indicating several key points. That should disrupt their flanking attempts and force them into our main line of fire. The combined fleet moved into position, and moments later, the Crawl Armada emerged from hyperspace. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Hundreds of Crawl ships, bristling with weapons, ready for war. The Crawl formation was tight and disciplined, reflecting their notorious efficiency and brutality. All ships, prepare for engagement, Marcus commanded, his voice steady. The fleet's weapons powered up, and the space between the two forces crackled with tension. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of fire. Energy beams and missile barrages lit up the void, creating a chaotic and deadly light show. The Intrepid's shields flared as they absorbed enemy hits, and the crew worked with precision to return fire. Lyria's insights proved invaluable as she directed the fleet's movements, predicting Crawl tactics and coordinating counterattacks. Focus fire on their lead ships, she instructed. Break their formation and sow confusion among their ranks. The Allied fleet executed her commands with remarkable coordination. Human and Elorian ships fought side by side, their combined firepower creating breaches in the Crawl lines. The Crawl, caught off guard by the intensity and unity of the Allied forces, began to falter. In the heart of the battle, Marcus led a daring maneuver, taking the Intrepid into the thick of the fighting. The ship's advanced weapons systems unleashed devastating volleys, crippling several Kraul vessels, but the Kraul were relentless, and the Intrepid took heavy damage in the process. "We can't sustain this much longer," Marcus warned. "We need to disable their flagship." Lyria scanned the battlefield, identifying the Kraul command ship, a massive, heavily armored behemoth coordinating the enemy forces. "There," she pointed. "If we take out their flagship, we can break their command structure." With the fleet's focus shifting to the Kraul flagship, a concentrated assault began. The Intrepid led the charge, its weapon systems firing relentlessly. The Kraul flagship returned fire, its powerful cannons wreaking havoc on the Allied ships. Amidst the chaos, Marcus devised a risky plan. "Prepare a boarding party," he ordered. "We'll take out their command from the inside." The boarding party assembled quickly, a mix of seasoned Marines and technical experts. Marcus, donning his combat gear, took the lead, with Lyria by his side. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Marcus nodded firmly. "It's our best shot. We need to take out their command and end this battle." The Intrepid shuttles launched, weaving through the firefight to reach the Kraul flagship. They docked with a heavy jolt, and the boarding team stormed through the airlock. Inside, the corridors of the Kraul ship were a stark contrast to their own, a maze of cold metal and harsh lighting. The team moved swiftly, encountering fierce resistance from Kraul soldiers. Blaster fire echoed through the halls as they fought their way towards the command center. Marcus led with tactical precision, his leadership inspiring confidence in his team. They breached the command center, a cavernous room filled with holographic displays and Kraul officers. The battle intensified, and in the ensuing chaos, Marcus and Lyria made their way to the main control console. "Cover us!" Marcus shouted as they worked to disable the ship's systems. Lyria accessed the terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency. "Disabling their command network now." As the Kraul flagship systems went offline, the enemy fleet's coordination collapsed. The Allied ships pressed their advantage, overwhelming the disoriented Kraul forces. Victory seemed within reach, but the cost was high. A sudden explosion rocked the command center, and Marcus was thrown to the ground. Pain shot through his leg, and he realized he was trapped under debris. "Go," he urged Lyria. "Get out of here." Lyria hesitated, torn between completing the mission and saving her friend. "I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely, working to free him. But the damage was severe, and time was running out. "Listen to me," Marcus said, his voice pained but resolute. "You have to finish this, for all of us." With a heavy heart, Lyria nodded. She transmitted the final command to disable the Kraul flagship completely, then turned to Marcus. "I'll be back for you," she promised. The boarding team retreated, fighting their way back to the shuttles. As they launched from the crippled flagship, the Allied fleet delivered the final blow, destroying the Kraul command ship in a massive explosion. Back on the Intrepid, the mood was a mix of triumph and sorrow. The battle was won, but the cost was steep. Lyria, heart heavy with grief, stood on the bridge watching as the remaining Kraul ships retreated. Admiral Graves placed a hand on her shoulder. "He was a hero," he said softly. "We couldn't have done it without him." The Intrepid, battered but victorious, led the fleet back to the UHC headquarters. The crew mourned their fallen, but their resolve was stronger than ever. The Kraul had been dealt a significant blow, and the alliance between humans and Elorians had proven its worth. Lyria, now a respected leader among the crew, vowed to honor Marcus's sacrifice. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger for it. The fight was far from over, but united, they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The aftermath of the Battle of Orion's Belt left the Allied fleet in a state of both mourning and determination. The victory had come at a high cost, but it had also provided a crucial turning point in the war against the Kraul. The destruction of the Kraul flagship had shattered their command structure, sending ripples of chaos through their ranks. Lyria stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, her heart heavy with the loss of Marcus. His absence was a palpable void, but his legacy drove her forward. The data they had retrieved from the Kraul flagship was being analyzed, revealing vital information about the Krall's remaining strongholds and supply lines. Admiral Graves addressed the assembled officers and crew. "We have the Krall on the run, but they are far from defeated. We must press our advantage and strike their key positions before they can regroup." High Counselor Valar, now a firm ally, added, "Our fleets are ready. We will hit them where it hurts the most and ensure they can no longer threaten our worlds." The next phase of their campaign involved coordinated strikes on the Krall's supply depots and manufacturing facilities. The Allied fleet divided into task forces, each assigned specific targets critical to the Krall's war effort. The goal was clear: cripple their ability to wage war and force them into a defensive position. Lyria took command of one of the task forces, leading a contingent of both human and Elorian ships. Her reputation as a strategic genius had solidified her status among the ranks, and her leadership was widely respected. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also the resolve to honor Marcus's sacrifice by seeing their mission through. The task force's first target was a heavily fortified Krall supply depot, hidden within a dense asteroid field. The approach was perilous, requiring precise navigation and timing. Lyria's deep understanding of Krall tactics proved invaluable as she guided the fleet through the treacherous terrain. "All ships, hold formation and prepare for engagement," Lyria ordered, her voice steady over the comms. The fleet moved as one, their weapons ready. The Krall defenses sprang to life as they approached, turrets and fighter squadrons swarming to repel the attackers. The Allied fleet responded with coordinated fire, their combined firepower overwhelming the Krall positions. Lyria directed the assault with surgical precision, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's defenses. With the Krall's supply lines in disarray, and their strongholds falling one by one, the tide of the war had clearly turned. The Allied forces regrouped, taking the opportunity to repair and resupply. The Intrepid, now a symbol of resilience and unity, was at the heart of these efforts. Lyria spent long hours coordinating with other fleet commanders and strategizing the next moves. She found solace in the camaraderie that had developed among the crew and their allies. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where their species could coexist in peace. During a rare moment of quiet, Lyria visited the memorial erected in honor of those lost in the Battle of Orion's Belt, including Marcus. The memorial was a simple, elegant structure, adorned with holographic images and inscriptions of their names. Lyria stood before Marcus's inscription, her heart heavy but resolute. Dr. Elena Kovacs joined her, offering a comforting presence. "He would be proud of what we've accomplished," Elena said softly. "He believed in you, in all of us." Lyria nodded, her gaze fixed on the holographic image of Marcus. "His belief gave me strength. We will see this through, for him and for everyone who has sacrificed so much." The Alliance held a council meeting to discuss the next steps. High Counselor Valar and Admiral Graves led the discussions, with Lyria and other key leaders contributing their insights. The consensus was clear. The time had come to take the fight to the Krall's home territory and end the war once and for all. "We've weakened them significantly," Admiral Graves stated, "but we must deliver a final blow to ensure they can never threaten us again." High Counselor Valar agreed. "Our scouts have identified the location of their primary command center. It's heavily defended, but if we strike with full force, we can destroy their leadership and bring an end to their tyranny." Lyria felt a surge of determination. "We have come this far together. We must finish what we started and secure peace for our worlds." The Allied fleet mobilized for the final assault, their ships gleaming in the light of distant stars. The journey to the Krall home territory was fraught with danger, but their resolve was unwavering. As they approached the heart of the Krall Empire, the combined might of human and Elorian forces prepared for the ultimate battle. Lyria stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, her heart steady and her mind focused. The memories of those they had lost, and the hope for a brighter future, fueled her determination. This was the turning point, the moment that would define the fate of their galaxy. As the Allied fleet engaged the Krall defenses, the battle raged with unprecedented intensity. Ships clashed, and the void of space lit up with the fury of their conflict. Lyria directed her forces with unparalleled skill, her every command driving them closer to victory. The final push to the Kraul command center was a fierce and desperate struggle. The Allied fleet sustained heavy losses, but their unity and resolve carried them forward. In a climactic assault, they breached the Kraul defenses and targeted the heart of their command. Explosions rippled through the Kraul command center, and the once mighty empire crumbled under the relentless assault. The battle was won, and with it, the war. The Allied forces had triumphed, securing a future free from the shadow of the Kraul.